You've heard this one. A terrifying bridge can make a stranger fall in love because your racing heart tricks you into it. It's the kind of story that shows up in every pop psychology article and TED Talk. But that is not what the famous study actually found. The real experiment was stranger, messier, and far easier to misread, and the truth hiding underneath it says something unsettling about your own body. Start with the confusion itself. Fear and excitement run on a lot of the same machinery. A racing heart, shallow breath, a jolt of adrenaline. They aren't identical, but they overlap enough that the signals coming from your body can be genuinely ambiguous. And an ambiguous signal needs explaining. That's the real question hiding underneath the bridge study. When your heart is pounding, how does your mind decide why? We'll follow the evidence in order. The famous bridge, the two follow-ups the researchers ran to test their own result, the lab study that started it all, and the later trouble that narrowed the theory behind it. In 1974, the psychologists Donald Dutton and Arthur Aron ran their study at the Capilano Bridge, a long, narrow footbridge that sways around 70 meters above rocks and rapids. As the men crossed, a woman approached them on the bridge, asked them to fill out a short questionnaire right there, and offered her phone number in case they wanted the results. The questionnaire was quietly measuring what was on their minds. It asked them to invent a story about an ambiguous picture. The men on the high, swaying bridge wrote stories with more romantic and sexual content, and they were more likely to call. Of the men who took the number, roughly half from the suspension bridge phoned her, compared with far fewer from the stable bridge. Now, the first thing a good skeptic asks is, maybe the scary bridge just put people in a sociable mood. So the researchers also sent a male interviewer to do exactly the same thing. With a man on the other side, the effect flattened out, consistent with the idea that what mattered was having an attractive reason to explain a racing heart, not a general urge to call somebody. But there's a deeper problem, and to their credit, Dutton and Aron saw it. Maybe the kind of man who chooses to cross a terrifying bridge is just different, more of a thrill seeker, more likely to call a stranger anyway. That isn't arousal, that's personality. So they looked closer. On the scary bridge, they compared two groups. Some men were approached while still crossing, their bodies still buzzing. Others they reached only later, about 10 minutes after they'd left the bridge and calmed down. Same bridge, broadly the same kind of person. What differed was how much arousal was still in the system. The men caught, while still keyed up, showed the stronger pull, which points toward the state rather than the personality. Then they ran the cleanest version, in a lab. Men were told they'd receive electric shocks and led to expect either a mild one or a strong, painful one. While they waited, a woman was in the room. The men bracing for the strong shock, the more frightened men, reported more attraction to her. Because people were experimentally assigned to expect mild or strong, the thrill-seeker explanation no longer fit. 3 studies, each testing a different alternative explanation. This is the part the viral version always skips. To understand why this happens, you have to go back another decade. In 1962, Stanley Schachter and Jerome Singer told volunteers they were testing a vitamin called Suproxen. It was actually epinephrine, adrenaline. It made their hearts race and their hands tremble. Some were warned to expect those effects. Others were left in the dark about why their bodies were suddenly buzzing. Then each was placed in a room with an actor who behaved either giddy and playful or irritated and angry. The people who'd been warned had an explanation ready, it's just the injection. But the people left in the dark had a racing heart and no reason for it, so they borrowed one from the room. Next to the giddy actor, they reported feeling cheerful. Next to the angry one, annoyed. That became the 2-factor theory of emotion. A feeling is arousal, plus the story your mind attaches to it. Same chemical, 2 different emotions, depending on the explanation that happens to be available. It's an elegant idea, and it's where this story takes a turn. Here's the twist. The bridge effect survived better than the grand theory built to explain it. When later scientists tried to rebuild Schachter and Singer's result, it didn't come apart, but it didn't hold up cleanly either. In 1979, Marshall and Zimbardo failed to reproduce the euphoria half of the experiment. Unexplained arousal didn't reliably turn people cheerful next to a giddy actor. Around the same time, Christina Masloch took a different route, inducing arousal through hypnotic suggestion instead of a drug, and landed on a similar worry. When people couldn't explain why they felt activated, they tended to read it as something unpleasant, whatever the actor was doing. A later review by Rainer Reisenstein weighed all of this and argued that the strong claim that arousal is a blank slate your mind can label into any emotion had little solid support. But a sturdier claim survived. Arousal can intensify an emotion that's already there, and it can be misattributed from one source to another. Arousal turns up the volume, it doesn't write the song. Today, two-factor theory is treated as historically huge but contested, not debunked, but folded into newer accounts where emotion is built from bodily signals and context. Misattribution effects appear real, at least under some conditions. The original explanation for them was just too simple. That sharper view shows up in the follow-ups. A 1981 experiment found that after physical exercise, leftover arousal didn't make everyone more appealing. It amplified judgments, making attractive people seem more attractive and unattractive people less so. The volume went up on whatever was already there. And the roller coaster studies you may have heard about? In one, people interviewed right after stepping off a ride rated a stranger as more attractive than people still waiting in line. But the effect came with conditions, depending on context and on who was standing in front of them. It's no guarantee that a thrill ride makes strangers irresistible. So here's the honest conclusion, narrower than the myth, but stranger. Fear does not create love. What the evidence suggests is subtler. When your body is already aroused, your mind sometimes can't pin down the true source, and it may fold that arousal into how it reads the person in front of you. Not invented out of nothing, amplified and occasionally misfiled. This is not a dating trick. Manufacturing fear doesn't manufacture real attraction. And these studies measured short-term ratings and phone calls, not consent, not compatibility, not anything that lasts. What's worth keeping is the larger principle the bridge exposed almost by accident. Your emotions aren't simply read off your body. They're interpreted, and the interpretation can be wrong. The shaky bridge is just the cleanest place we've ever caught the mind in